BamaCentral.com. I'm Joey Blackwell here with Katie Windham, and this is Just a Minute. Alabama basketball was obviously eliminated from March Madness this past weekend in the Sweet 16, losing to San Diego State. San Diego State went on to, of course, advance to the Final Four along with three other teams in UConn, Miami, who will be facing UConn, and Florida Atlantic, the 9 seed. Everybody's pretty much favorite team right now who isn't rooting for the other three teams. The Owls will be facing, of course, San Diego State. But over the weekend, there was some discourse, not just from Alabama fans, but across college basketball of if March Madness is the penultimate way or the ultimate way, excuse me, to decide a champion of college basketball. Of course, on one side, you have that the best team in college basketball, more often than not, doesn't win the tournament. And then on the other hand, you have people advocating that that is what makes March Madness exciting. So let's start with you, Katie. What are your thoughts? Is March Madness the best way to decide an NCAA champion?
Look, I like to go with the motto, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think this year, even though we're seeing a bunch of lower seeded teams in the Final Four, 3 teams making their first ever Final Four appearances, like you said, I think that's exciting. Now, do I think it means we always see the best team win the national championship in basketball? No. I mean, I think that a number 1 overall seed hasn't won since 2013, but that also just shows the challenge of winning a national championship. So will one of the teams that wins the national championship this year be the best team in college basketball? Probably not. Maybe if UConn wins, you can make that argument because they've just been dominating teams in March or in the NCAA tournament so far. And we saw what happened when they played Alabama back in, I believe, November. So they're obviously a really good team. It'll probably be the favorite of the 4 teams that are left, even though Miami's been playing some good basketball too. So, and as we've seen with Florida Atlantic and San Diego State, anything can happen. So, but that's kind of the beauty of March. Now, I do think if you kind of want to parallel it to what we've seen in college football with the college football playoff lately, which we obviously know is expanding, that like I said, the more you expand it, the less like it is that you're going to get the best team that wins. So is that something we want to move towards in football, or we keep making it bigger and bigger? I don't know. But I think March Madness is fun and always has been. And I think a lot of Alabama fans are frustrated this year because of how things went with them being a 1 seed and losing. But so did every single other 1 seed. None of them even reached Elite 8. So it's just a crazy game and a crazy time of year. But what do you think, Joey?
I think that this that the Final Four we have really shows the beauty of March. Kind of alluding to what you said. You have 4 teams. You have San Diego State, who obviously had a heartbreaking end to the 2020 season, where they might have been a 1 seed, had a ridiculously good record. And then, of course, the tournament didn't happen that year. You have Florida Atlantic, who, of course, is everybody's Cinderella right now. UConn, who is, historically a good program that belongs in there that still could very much win. And then you have Miami, who kind of dominated the ACC in a year that the conference really kind of had a down year. You're not seeing the typical blue bloods of North Carolina and Duke dominate week in and week out like we normally see. So I really like this Final Four. I get why a lot of people are disappointed. You don't have Houston in there. You don't have the traditional teams like Gonzaga or Purdue was ousted very early on. I think, Purdue's actually ousted in the first round. You also can't get mad at teams for beating Alabama. I know Alabama fans were, of course, aggravated over the weekend, but if Alabama had beaten San Diego State, that was really supposed to be the first game of pretty much a cakewalk to the Final Four. Had they beaten them, they likely would have beaten Creighton, as we saw San Diego State was able to take care of Creighton. And then, of course, Florida Atlantic is a really, really good team that's peaking right at the perfect time. But when you put them on the court against a team like Alabama, who on paper has a much deeper and more talented roster, you got to like Alabama's odds. So, but that's the beauty of March. Alabama is out, and they have the Aztecs there versus the Owls, and that's what makes the beauty of the NCAA tournament. There's always next year, as a lot of people will say. But
I will say too, on the women's side, they do have Iowa 1 seed is advanced to the Final Four. LSU's 3 seed that's advanced, and then as of today, when we're recording this, you got a 1 versus 2 matchup and a 1 versus 3 matchup. So over on the women's side, the top teams kind of are advancing, but they also have had some upsets throughout. So it's you're kind of seeing in both tournaments this year kind of the opposite effects. Probably the Final Four in women's will be all teams, or it will be teams seeded 3 and above, and then the men's team we've got no one seeded higher than a 5, which is pretty nuts.
And I think with this year also, it kind of undermines the entire argument for expansion for the NCAA tournament, just because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, I mean, it destroys the argument, but also builds it up at the same time, because on one hand, you have people saying that, well, if you allowed more lower seeds in, teams that normally wouldn't make the tournament, then you might have more often Final Fours like this. But on the other hand, you would have the argument that, oh, well, if you put all these lower teams in, they're just going to get destroyed by these teams that made the Final Four that do deserve to be there because of what the path they've made. So it kind of builds it up but tears it down at the same time. I personally don't like expansion. I think that 68 teams is more than enough. I think if you add any more, you do start to get into teams that have losing records that somehow are able to make it in. But I digress. This is a very long conversation, and no doubt this is going to be going on for a very long time, the entire offseason, particularly from upset fans of one seeds. But that'll about do it for BamaCentral.com. I'm Joey Blackwell with Katie Windham. This has been Just a Minute. Thank you so much for watching.